When a school janitor notices a 6-year-old girl who brings an elaborate lunch every day but never takes a single bite, something doesn't add up. Day after day, the untouched food goes straight into the trash, while the child grows thinner and more withdrawn with each passing week. What he discovered when he followed her home one evening would reveal a heartbreaking deception that no child should ever have to maintain. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you believe in protecting children who cannot speak for themselves, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that matter. At first, Frank Rodriguez thought the girl was just a picky eater, until he uncovered the devastating truth that would change her life forever. Frank Rodriguez had been the head custodian at Willowbrook Elementary School for 23 years, and in that time, he'd developed an intimate understanding of the rhythms and patterns that defined daily life in an elementary school. Unlike teachers who saw children primarily in classroom settings or administrators who interacted with students mainly during disciplinary situations, Frank observed children in their most unguarded moments, during transitions between classes, in hallways, when they thought no adults were watching, and, most tellingly, during lunch periods when social hierarchies and personal struggles often became most visible. At 58, Frank brought a unique perspective to his work that went far beyond maintaining clean facilities and functional equipment. His role as custodian placed him in every corner of the school throughout the day, making him an inadvertent witness to behaviors and interactions that other staff members might miss. Over more than 2 decades, he developed an almost paternal instinct for spotting children who were struggling, whether academically, socially, or emotionally. Frank's background contributed to his sensitivity to children's needs. The eldest of 7 children in a working-class Mexican-American family, he'd grown up understanding the challenges that financial instability and family stress could create for young people. His own childhood had included periods of food insecurity and housing instability that taught him to recognize the subtle signs of neglect and deprivation that many middle-class educators might overlook or misinterpret. Before beginning his career in school maintenance, Frank had worked for 8 years as a youth counselor at a community center in East Los Angeles, where he'd specialized in programs for at-risk children and teenagers. His transition to school custodial work had been motivated by a desire for stable employment with good benefits, when his wife Maria became pregnant with their first child. But he'd never lost his protective instincts toward vulnerable young people. The school itself served a diverse community in suburban Arizona, where families ranged from affluent retirees and technology professionals to agricultural workers and service industry employees struggling with housing costs and job insecurity. Frank had developed relationships with families across this spectrum, often serving as an informal liaison between struggling parents and school resources they might not know how to access. His custodial responsibilities required him to be present during lunch periods when he cleaned and maintained the cafeteria while students ate. This timing had given him years of opportunity to observe children's eating habits, social interactions, and general well-being during one of the most revealing times of their school day. He'd learned to recognize children who were hungry but too proud to ask for help, kids who were being bullied by classmates, and those whose behavior suggested problems at home. On this particular Tuesday morning in late March, Frank was conducting his routine inspection of classrooms before students arrived when he noticed something that would begin a pattern of observations leading to a life-changing discovery. 6-year-old Sofia Martinez had arrived early and was sitting alone at her desk in Mrs. Peterson's first-grade classroom, carefully arranging an elaborate lunch that appeared far too sophisticated for a child her age to have prepared. The lunch spread before Sofia included a gourmet sandwich on artisan bread, organic fruit cut into decorative shapes, expensive yogurt, and premium crackers arranged in a compartmentalized lunch container that appeared to cost more than many families spent on groceries in a week. Everything was perfectly presented, as if it had been prepared by a professional caterer rather than a busy parent rushing to get a child ready for school. What struck Frank as unusual wasn't the quality of the lunch itself. Many children at Willowbrook came from affluent families who prioritized organic, high-end foods, but rather Sophia's behavior as she arranged and rearranged the items. She handled each component with careful reverence, but there was something in her expression that suggested longing rather than anticipation, as if she were looking at food she knew she wouldn't be eating. Sophia Martinez had been on Frank's informal radar since the beginning of the school year, though not for any single dramatic incident that would have brought her to official attention. Instead, she'd caught his notice through an accumulation of small observations that suggested a child who was struggling in ways that weren't immediately obvious to her teachers or classmates. Unlike many first graders who arrived at school with obvious excitement about seeing friends and participating in activities, Sophia consistently appeared tired and somewhat withdrawn. She was unfailingly polite when she interacted with adults, but her social interactions with peers seemed limited and somewhat stilted, as if she weren't entirely comfortable with normal childhood behaviors like laughing loudly or engaging in spontaneous play. Most significantly, Frank had noticed that Sophia seemed smaller and more fragile than most children her age, with the kind of pale complexion and low energy that often indicated inadequate nutrition. While many 6-year-olds were naturally small and energetic, Sophia moved with the careful deliberation of someone who was conserving limited physical resources. During lunch periods, Frank had begun paying particular attention to Sophia's eating habits, and what he observed was both puzzling and concerning. Despite bringing elaborate, expensive-looking lunches every day, Sophia rarely seemed to eat more than a few small bites before carefully packing everything away and disposing of the untouched food. This pattern was particularly troubling because Sophia often watched other children eat with a kind of intense focus that suggested she was genuinely hungry. Frank's experience with food insecurity during his own childhood had taught him to recognize the complex emotions and behaviors that surrounded hunger and deprivation. Children who were genuinely well-fed approached food with casual confidence, eating when hungry, and leaving food behind without anxiety. Children who had experienced food scarcity, even if their current situation appeared stable, often displayed heightened awareness of food availability and consumption patterns that seemed disproportionate to their immediate circumstances. Over the following weeks, Frank began documenting Sophia's lunch behavior more systematically, making mental notes about her daily patterns while being careful not to make her feel observed or self-conscious. What he discovered was both consistent and deeply troubling. Every day, Sophia arrived at school with a lunch that appeared to cost between $20 and $30. Artisan breads, organic produce, premium dairy products, and specialty items that even affluent families typically reserved for special occasions. The presentation was always perfect, with foods arranged in expensive containers and complemented by cloth napkins and real silverware rather than plastic utensils. However, Sophia's actual consumption of these elaborate meals was minimal and appeared to be performative rather than nutritional. She would carefully unpack each item, arrange them attractively on her desk, take a few small bites of one or two components, and then methodically repack everything before disposing of the majority untouched. Most tellingly, Frank noticed that Sophia's attention during lunch periods was focused not on her own food, but on observing other children's meals and eating behaviors. She watched with particular intensity when classmates shared snacks or when children who had forgotten lunches received food from the school's emergency supply. This hypervigilance around food suggested someone who was acutely aware of food availability and distribution, behavior more consistent with chronic hunger than with normal childhood appetite fluctuations. Frank also began paying attention to Sophia's physical appearance and energy levels throughout the day. What he observed confirmed his growing suspicions that, despite the elaborate lunches, Sophia was not receiving adequate nutrition. She appeared to lose weight over the course of the school year rather than gaining it, as would be expected for a growing child. Her energy levels were consistently low, and she often seemed dizzy or unsteady, particularly in the afternoons. Most concerning, Frank noticed that Sophia had begun displaying behaviors associated with food hoarding and protection. When working in her classroom during lunch periods, he observed her carefully collecting any food items that other children left behind, crackers, fruit, unopened packages, and secreting them in her backpack when she thought no one was looking. The combination of elaborate lunches that went uneaten, physical signs of malnutrition, and food hoarding behaviors created a pattern that Frank recognized from his youth counseling experience. Sophia appeared to be living in a household where food insecurity was a chronic problem, but where maintaining appearances of affluence and stability was critically important to the adults responsible for her care. Frank's concerns deepened when he began paying attention to Sophia's interactions with school staff and her responses to offers of additional food or snacks. When teachers occasionally offered treats during classroom celebrations, Sophia's reactions were telling. She would accept food items with obvious gratitude, but would typically save them, rather than eating them immediately, suggesting that she was prioritizing future food security over immediate satisfaction. Most heartbreakingly, Frank noticed that Sophia had developed elaborate strategies for disguising her hunger and deflecting adult attention from her eating habits. She would engage teachers in conversation during lunch periods to distract from her minimal food consumption, volunteer to help with classroom tasks that kept her busy during meal times, and consistently praise her delicious lunch, while barely touching any of it. After 6 weeks of systematic observation, Frank realized that Sophia's situation required intervention, but he also understood that approaching the problem incorrectly could potentially make her circumstances worse. If Sophia was indeed living in a household where appearances were maintained through deception, direct inquiry about her eating habits or family circumstances could result in increased pressure or punishment for failing to maintain the required facade. Frank decided to begin with subtle attempts to provide Sophia with additional food opportunities that wouldn't appear to challenge her family's narrative about her lunch situation. He began timing his hallway cleaning to coincide with Sophia's movements between classes, offering her small snacks like crackers or fruit that he claimed were extras from teacher supplies or leftovers from staff meetings. Sophia's responses to these offers confirmed Frank's suspicions. She accepted food with obvious relief and gratitude, typically eating immediately and completely, but always asked anxious questions about whether accepting the food would get anyone in trouble or whether she needed to tell her family about receiving additional nutrition at school. The anxiety Sophia displayed around accepting help suggested that she had been specifically instructed to maintain the illusion that she was well fed and that her family was providing adequately for her needs. This type of coaching was common in households where neglect or abuse was occurring, but where maintaining social respectability was essential for avoiding outside scrutiny. Frank's concern reached a critical point when he observed Sophia during a particularly difficult afternoon in early May. The school had hosted a spring festival that included food vendors and family activities, but Sophia had not been picked up by family members and had spent the event sitting alone, watching other families enjoy meals together. When Frank found Sophia in an empty classroom after the festival, she was crying quietly while eating small crackers she had apparently saved from several previous days. The sight of a 6-year-old rationing stale crackers while surrounded by evidence of abundance and celebration convinced Frank that immediate intervention was necessary. "Sophia, are you feeling okay today?" Frank asked gently, sitting down at a child-sized chair so they could speak at eye level. "I'm fine, Mr. Frank," Sophia replied automatically, quickly wiping her tears and hiding the crackers. I was just resting. "It's okay to not feel fine sometimes," Frank said carefully. "Sometimes when kids are worried about things at home, it can make them feel sad or tired or hungry." Sophia's reaction was immediate and revealing. Her eyes widened with obvious fear, and she began speaking in what was clearly a rehearsed response. "My family takes really good care of me. I get lots of good food, and I have everything I need. I'm not supposed to talk about family business with people at school." The coached response confirmed Frank's worst fears. Sophia had been specifically trained to deflect questions about her home life and to present a narrative of adequate care regardless of her actual circumstances. This type of preparation suggested systematic neglect or abuse that was being deliberately concealed from authorities. "Sophia, I want you to know that it's always okay to tell adults if you're hungry or if you need help with anything," Frank said firmly. "Sometimes families go through hard times, and that's not anyone's fault. There are lots of people at school whose job it is to help children when they need it." "I don't need help," Sophia insisted, but her voice carried a desperation that contradicted her words. "My lunch is always really good, and my family makes sure I have everything." Frank realized that direct questioning would not be effective given Sophia's obvious training to maintain family secrets. Instead, he decided that the only way to understand Sophia's true circumstances would be to observe her home environment directly. That evening, Frank made a decision that would prove to be life-saving for Sophia Martinez. Rather than going directly home after work, he waited until Sophia's normal pickup time to see who collected her from school and to observe their interaction patterns. What he witnessed confirmed his suspicions while revealing details that were even more disturbing than he had anticipated. Sophia was not picked up by a parent or family member, but instead waited alone on the school steps until nearly 6 p.m., more than 2 hours after most students had left, before beginning to walk home by herself. Frank followed at a discreet distance as Sophia made her way through residential neighborhoods toward a part of town known for rental properties and transitional housing. The walk took nearly 40 minutes, suggesting that Sophia was traveling a considerable distance twice daily to attend Willowbrook Elementary, possibly because her family wanted her enrolled at a school in a more affluent district to maintain appearances. Sophia's destination was a small, poorly maintained apartment complex where multiple families appeared to be living in overcrowded conditions. Frank watched from his parked car as Sophia approached a ground-floor unit where loud voices and music suggested ongoing activity despite the late hour. What Frank observed when Sophia entered the apartment made him immediately reach for his cell phone to call 911. Through the partially open door and windows, he could see that the apartment was severely overcrowded with what appeared to be multiple adults and several other children. The living conditions were clearly substandard, with evidence of inadequate furniture, poor sanitation, and general neglect. Most concerning, Frank witnessed an adult man, apparently Sophia's father or guardian, shouting angrily at Sophia about being late and demanding to know what she had told people at school. The man's aggressive behavior and Sophia's obvious terror suggested that she faced punishment for normal childhood activities like staying late for school events or having conversations with caring adults. Frank also observed that there was no evidence of food preparation or availability in the visible areas of the apartment. The refrigerator appeared to be non-functional, and the kitchen area showed no signs of recent cooking or food storage. This confirmed his suspicions about Sophia's hunger and explained why she brought elaborate lunches that she couldn't actually eat. They were likely props designed to conceal the reality of her family's inability to provide adequate nutrition. The 911 call Frank made that evening set in motion a series of events that would dramatically change Sophia's life trajectory. When emergency services and child protective services arrived at the apartment complex, they discovered living conditions that met legal definitions of child endangerment and neglect. Sophia was living with 7 other people in a 2-bedroom apartment that lacked basic necessities like functioning utilities, adequate food storage, and proper sanitation. The elaborate lunches she brought to school were revealed to be carefully constructed deceptions, expensive items shoplifted from grocery stores, and arranged to create the impression of family affluence, while Sophia herself survived on minimal nutrition. The adults in the household had been coaching Sophia and the other children to maintain lies about their living situation, specifically to avoid detection by school authorities or social services. The children had been taught to describe adequate housing, regular meals, and proper supervision regardless of their actual circumstances, creating a systematic deception designed to prevent intervention. Emergency responders found Sophia in a state of severe malnutrition and dehydration that required immediate medical attention. Despite her elaborate daily lunches, she had been surviving primarily on minimal amounts of food that other children shared with her at school, and small portions that she could obtain without drawing attention from the adults in her household. Sophia was immediately placed in emergency foster care with Elena and Miguel Santos, experienced therapeutic foster parents who specialized in caring for children recovering from severe neglect and malnutrition. Their warm, stable home had been specifically designed to provide healing environments for children who had experienced food insecurity, featuring a well-stocked kitchen where children were encouraged to help prepare meals and participate in normal family food activities. "We're so happy to meet you, Sophia," Elena said gently as she showed Sophia around their home, being particularly careful to explain meal times, snack availability, and the family's approach to food sharing. "We know you've been hungry for a long time, and we want you to understand that there's always enough food here for everyone." Sophia's initial response to the abundance and security of the Santos home was complex, relief mixed with disbelief that such stability could be permanent, and anxiety about whether she was somehow deceiving these kind adults about deserving their care. "Do I have to bring my own lunch to school?" Sophia asked quietly, this question revealing how central food anxiety had become to her understanding of daily survival. "No, sweetheart," Miguel explained with a warm smile. "We'll pack lunches for you, or you can choose to eat the school lunch, or we can decide together each morning what sounds good to you. The important thing is that you get enough healthy food to grow strong and feel good." The concept of choice in food selection was revolutionary for Sophia, who had spent months carefully managing a deception designed to hide her hunger while surviving on whatever minimal nutrition she could access without detection. Over the following days, Sophia began the gradual process of learning to trust that food would be consistently available and that eating was not a privilege that could be revoked based on her behavior or the adult's mood. The Santos family, experienced in working with children recovering from food insecurity, provided patient guidance as Sophia adjusted to regular meals and learned to recognize her own hunger and satiation cues. Frank visited regularly, both to support Sophia's transition and to witness the remarkable transformation that adequate nutrition and emotional security created in a child who had been struggling for survival. Within the first week, Sophia's energy levels increased dramatically, her concentration improved, and she began displaying the natural curiosity and enthusiasm that had been suppressed by chronic hunger and stress. Most significantly, Sophia began asking questions about food, nutrition, and cooking, interests that had been impossible to explore when her entire relationship with food was defined by scarcity and deception. Elena and Miguel encouraged these interests by involving Sophia in meal preparation and teaching her about healthy eating habits, creating positive associations with food for the first time in her young life. 2 weeks after her rescue, Frank received news that ensured Sophia's permanent safety and provided closure about her family situation. The adults in her former household had been arrested on multiple charges, including child endangerment, fraud, and theft. Investigation revealed that the elaborate lunch deception had been part of a broader pattern of criminal activity designed to maintain appearances while neglecting basic care for multiple children. More importantly for Sophia's future, the investigation had identified her maternal grandmother, Carmen Martinez, who lived in Nevada and had been searching for Sophia since her daughter had disappeared with her several years earlier. Carmen had been unaware of Sophia's location and circumstances, believing that her daughter had moved to another state for employment opportunities. What this means, the social worker explained to Sophia in terms she could understand, is that you have a grandmother who loves you very much and wants to take care of you. She has a nice home and enough food for both of you, and she's been worried about you for a long time. When Sophia met her grandmother Carmen for the first time in years, her reaction was one of cautious hope mixed with obvious relief at connecting with someone who represented genuine family love rather than the exploitative relationships she had experienced in the apartment complex. "Mija, I've been looking for you everywhere," Carmen said tearfully as she embraced Sophia. "I'm going to make sure you're never hungry again, and we're going to cook all your favorite foods together." The promise of cooking together represented more than just adequate nutrition. It symbolized the kind of nurturing relationship that would allow Sophia to develop healthy attitudes toward food and eating for the first time in her memory. 3 weeks after her rescue, Sophia had begun displaying remarkable resilience and healing capacity that amazed even the experienced professionals working with her case. Her natural intelligence and creativity, which had been channeled into survival strategies and deception, now flourished as she experienced consistent care and genuine family love. Frank was completing his afternoon cleaning when Sophia appeared in the hallway one day, now carrying a simple lunch packed by her grandmother in a regular lunchbox rather than the elaborate deceptions she had maintained for months. "Mr. Frank, look what Abuela made for me." Sophia approached him with a lunchbox that contained simple, nutritious foods prepared with obvious love: a sandwich, fruit, crackers, and a thermos of homemade soup. "And she said I can eat all of it, because there's always more food at home." The simple statement revealed how much healing had occurred. Sophia, understanding that adequate nutrition was a basic right, rather than a privilege that required elaborate deception to maintain. "That looks delicious, Sophia," Frank said, feeling tears threaten as he observed the complete transformation from a malnourished child surviving on secrets to a healthy girl confident in her family's care. "I'm so happy that you have enough good food now." "Abuela is teaching me how to cook, too," Sophia announced proudly. "And she says when I get bigger, I can help make lunches for other kids who might be hungry like I was." As Sophia skipped toward her classroom, moving with the energy and confidence of a well-nourished, loved child, Frank reflected on the transformation he'd witnessed. In the space of just weeks, a severely neglected child had become someone who could express hope about her future and think about helping other children facing similar struggles. 6 months later, Frank received an invitation that filled him with professional satisfaction and personal joy. Sophia and her grandmother were hosting a celebration dinner to thank the people who had helped during Sophia's rescue and recovery, and Sophia had specifically requested that Frank be the guest of honor. When Frank arrived at Carmen's comfortable home, he found Sophia thriving in every possible way. She had gained healthy weight, her academic performance had improved dramatically, and she was participating in normal childhood activities like soccer and art classes that had been impossible when she was struggling for basic survival. "Mr. Frank," Sophia greeted him at the door, wearing a bright dress and beaming with happiness. "Come see the dinner Abuela and I made together. We made enough food for everyone to have seconds." The pride Sophia took in having prepared abundant food for others demonstrated her complete transformation from someone who hoarded crackers for survival to a child who understood that sharing meals was an expression of love and community. "I'm so proud of you, Sophia," Frank said, surveying the feast that grandmother and granddaughter had prepared together. "You've grown so much, and I can see how happy and healthy you are." "I want to be a teacher when I grow up," Sophia announced confidently, "and I want to help kids who might be hungry or scared like I was. Abuela says helping others is the best way to show we're grateful for good things that happen to us." Stories like these remind us that school staff members in every role serve as crucial guardians for vulnerable children, combining professional dedication with compassionate observation to identify those suffering in silence behind carefully maintained facades. Every day, heroes like Frank are making these life-saving discoveries through attention to patterns that don't make sense and willingness to look deeper when children's behaviors suggest hidden pain. But how many children are still maintaining elaborate deceptions to hide their hunger and neglect, waiting for someone to care enough to see through the lies to their desperate truth? Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more powerful stories of rescue and redemption.
When a school counselor notices a third-grade girl who flinches dramatically at the sound of any closing door, something about her frightened reaction begins to deeply trouble him. What started as a casual observation during a routine classroom visit would soon uncover a family situation that had been hidden behind closed doors for years. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below, and if you believe that sometimes the most important interventions happen when professionals trust their instincts and go beyond their normal routines, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that matter. He couldn't have known that his decision to follow up on this small but significant behavioral cue would transform not just one child's life, but an entire community's approach to family support, until he witnessed firsthand the reality she faced every day after the final school bell rang. Michael Rodriguez had been the counselor at Oakwood Elementary for just over 3 years. At 37, his calm demeanor and genuine empathy had quickly earned him the trust of both students and staff in the diverse suburban school district. With his neatly trimmed beard, thoughtful brown eyes, and tendency to wear colorful ties that gave children an easy conversation starter, Mr. Rodriguez, Mr. R, to his students, had created a counseling program where even the most hesitant children eventually felt comfortable seeking support. Beyond simply responding to crises, Michael had developed a proactive approach to student well-being, regularly visiting classrooms to observe dynamics and identify potential concerns before they escalated. His office reflected this welcoming philosophy, comfortable seating arranged in a circular pattern rather than across a desk, walls painted a calming blue and decorated with student artwork, and shelves filled with carefully selected books and therapeutic games. Unlike the sterile, clinical spaces that sometimes characterize school counseling offices, Michael had deliberately created an environment that felt safe and inviting to children of all ages and backgrounds. The space smelled faintly of the peppermint tea he often drank, and soft instrumental music typically played in the background during individual sessions. Michael lived in a modest home about 20 minutes from the school with his wife Elena, a pediatric nurse, and their 10-year-old son Lucas. The family had moved to the area 4 years earlier when Elena received a position at the Regional Children's Hospital, and Michael had quickly found his professional home at Oakwood. Their shared commitment to children's well-being made them particularly effective sounding boards for each other's challenging cases, with Elena's medical perspective often complementing Michael's psychological insights. Principal Vanessa Chen valued Michael's contributions to Oakwood's overall mission. "You've created a counseling program that's truly integrated into our educational approach," she had noted during his most recent evaluation. "The teachers see you as an essential partner rather than someone they only call when there's a problem." Michael had accepted the praise graciously, though privately he considered this collaborative approach fundamental to effective school counseling rather than a special achievement. Third-grade teacher Abigail Foster had become one of Michael's closest colleagues at Oakwood. They frequently consulted on supporting students with emotional or behavioral challenges, with Abigail often being the first to notice subtle changes that warranted deeper investigation. Their professional partnership had grown particularly effective because Abigail respected Michael's expertise, while he valued her daily insights into student behavior and classroom dynamics. "Between your classroom observations and my one-on-one sessions," Michael often remarked, "we usually get a pretty complete picture of what's happening with a child." There had been discussions at recent administrative meetings about the increasing complexity of student needs within the district. Budget constraints had limited the counseling department to just Michael and a part-time social worker for over 500 elementary students, well beyond the recommended ratios for effective mental health support in schools. These limitations sometimes forced difficult decisions about which student needs could receive immediate attention and which had to be addressed through small group interventions or placed on waiting lists for individual support. One Tuesday afternoon in early October, Michael had encountered an unfamiliar woman speaking with Principal Chun in the main office. The woman, who he later learned was Dr. Alicia Morales, the newly appointed director of the county's Trauma-Informed Care Initiative, had greeted him with genuine interest when introduced, asking thoughtful questions about Oakwood's approach to supporting students experiencing adversity. There was something refreshingly practical in her perspective that aligned with Michael's own beliefs about the intersection of educational achievement and emotional well-being. "We're trying to help schools recognize that many challenging behaviors are actually adaptations to stress or trauma," Dr. Morales had explained. "When we understand the why behind a behavior, we can respond more effectively than with traditional discipline approaches." This philosophy mirrored Michael's own practice so closely that he'd left the brief conversation feeling cautiously hopeful about potential new partnerships and resources that might benefit his overstretched counseling program. Autumn had settled over the suburb of Oakwood, bringing crisp mornings and golden afternoons that transformed the elementary school's maple-lined playground into a canvas of red and orange. The school itself, a sprawling single-story building constructed in the early 2000s, served approximately 520 students from diverse socio-economic backgrounds. Inside, classrooms hummed with the rhythm of a new academic year now fully underway, routines established and relationships formed after the initial weeks of adjustment. It was during this season of settling in that Michael first noticed something troubling about Olivia Martinez, an 8-year-old girl in Miss Foster's third-grade class. The child was academically capable but socially withdrawn, with large dark eyes that seemed to constantly scan her environment and long black hair that she often used as a curtain to partially hide her face. Her file indicated she lived with her mother and stepfather, with limited contact with her biological father, who had moved to another state following the divorce 3 years earlier. But nothing could prepare Michael for the mystery that would unfold around Olivia's unusual reaction to closing doors. The first time Michael really took notice was during a routine classroom visit to Ms. Foster's class. He had been observing a small group activity as part of a bullying prevention curriculum he was implementing throughout the school. As he was preparing to leave, the classroom door closed behind another student with a louder-than-usual thud. The sound wasn't particularly startling to most, but Michael's trained eye caught Olivia's immediate physical response, a full-body flinch, her shoulders hunching protectively, hands moving slightly upward as if to shield her face, her expression momentarily freezing in what appeared to be fear before quickly recomposing. The reaction was so pronounced yet swift that Michael wasn't entirely sure he had interpreted it correctly. Making a mental note to observe more carefully, he continued his regular visits to Ms. Foster's classroom over the next 2 weeks, positioning himself to better view Olivia's responses to environmental stimuli. The pattern soon became unmistakable. Any unexpected closing door, whether the classroom door, cabinet doors, or even the closing of a heavy textbook, triggered the same pronounced startle response in Olivia. What made it particularly concerning was the intensity of the reaction coupled with her obvious efforts to conceal it immediately afterward, glancing around quickly to see if anyone had noticed, her face flushing with what appeared to be embarrassment when she caught Michael observing her. "I've noticed something interesting about Olivia Martinez," Michael mentioned casually to Abigail Foster after school one day. "She has an unusually strong startle response to doors closing or similar sudden sounds." Abigail nodded thoughtfully. "I've noticed that too. When I mentioned it to her mother at conference night, she said Olivia has always been a jumpy child. Apparently, she was the same way as a toddler, sensitive to loud noises. Did you get any sense of whether they've had her hearing checked or looked into sensory processing issues?" Michael asked. Her mother seemed dismissive, actually, Abigail replied, her brow furrowing slightly as she recalled the interaction. She changed the subject quickly. The stepfather did most of the talking during the conference, focusing exclusively on Olivia's academic performance. He seemed impatient when I brought up her social withdrawal and anxiety. This information added another layer to Michael's growing concern. In his experience, when caregivers deflected discussions about a child's emotional or behavioral issues, particularly those that might indicate distress, it sometimes signaled problems within the home environment. How does Olivia interact with them? He asked, thinking about the family dynamics he'd observed in the limited interactions during school events. With her mother, there's a strange tension, Abigail observed. Olivia seems simultaneously clingy and distant, seeking physical proximity but without much actual interaction. With the stepfather, she hesitated. She rarely makes eye contact with him and becomes noticeably quieter when he speaks. I initially attributed it to the blended family adjustment, but it's been 3 years since the remarriage. Michael made a decision. I'd like to add Olivia to my check-in list, if you think that would be helpful. Nothing formal yet, just regular brief interactions to build some rapport and see if there's something more we should be addressing. Abigail agreed, and over the next several weeks, Michael created natural opportunities to connect with Olivia, brief conversations during recess, inviting her to help with simple tasks when he visited the classroom, and eventually casual lunch bunch groups with other students. Throughout these interactions, he observed additional concerning patterns. Though not obviously malnourished, Olivia sometimes hoarded food, slipping items into her pockets when she thought no one was watching. She wore long sleeves regardless of the temperature, tugging them down frequently to ensure her arms remained covered. Most tellingly, she became increasingly anxious as the school day drew to a close, her hypervigilance escalating visibly in the hour before dismissal. "I'm worried about Olivia Martinez," Michael told Principal Chun during their weekly meeting. "There's a constellation of behaviors that suggest significant anxiety, possibly related to her home situation." He detailed his observations of the flinching, food hoarding, clothing choices that could be concealing injuries and dismissal anxiety, along with Ms. Foster's insights about the family dynamics observed during conferences. "Has she disclosed anything concerning during your interactions?" the principal asked. "No direct disclosures," Michael admitted. "She's extremely guarded, which itself is noteworthy for a child her age. When I ask general questions about home, she gives minimal, clearly rehearsed responses. Everything's fine. We're all good, it feels scripted. What are you thinking might be happening?" Principal Chun asked, her expression serious. "I'm not certain," Michael replied honestly. "It could be exposure to domestic violence, direct abuse, or a highly volatile home environment. The flinching response to doors closing is particularly suggestive of an association between that sound and something frightening or dangerous." They discussed potential next steps, including a more formal check-in schedule with Olivia and possibly reaching out to the mother independently to discuss the school's concerns. However, without clearer evidence of abuse or neglect, their options for intervention were somewhat limited. "Let's start with increased support at school and more information gathering," Principal Chun suggested. "Document everything carefully. If we need to make a report later, we'll want detailed observations." Michael agreed, though he left the meeting with a lingering sense of unease. His professional instincts, honed through years of working with children in crisis, suggested Olivia's situation might be more urgent than their measured institutional response acknowledged. But nothing could have prepared Michael for what he would discover the following week. The revelation began with a seemingly minor incident during a fire drill. The unexpected alarm had triggered predictable chaos as students lined up to exit the building. Michael, positioned in the hallway to help with the evacuation, noticed Olivia frozen in place while her classmates moved around her. Her face had gone completely pale, her breathing rapid and shallow, clear signs of a panic response far beyond typical fire drill anxiety. Moving quickly to her side, Michael spoke in the calm, grounding tone he used with children experiencing acute distress. "Olivia, you're at school. This is just a drill. You're safe. Can you look at me and take a deep breath?" The girl's eyes, wide with terror, finally focused on his face. "Is there a fire?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the alarm. "No, just a practice," he assured her. "Everyone is safe." As he guided her outside with her class, Michael noted how her entire body trembled even after the alarm stopped. When they returned to the classroom and normal activities resumed, he observed her slip into the classroom bathroom, emerging several minutes later with reddened eyes that suggested she had been crying. This extreme reaction to a routine drill heightened Michael's concerns significantly. With Principal Chen's approval, he arranged a more formal individual check-in with Olivia later that week, framing it as a general wellness check rather than a response to her specific behaviors to avoid causing additional anxiety. During their session, Michael used therapeutic drawing activities designed to help children express emotions they might struggle to verbalize. When asked to draw a place where you feel safe, Olivia carefully created a detailed picture of the school library, notably, not her home. Her drawing of things that worry you included dark, jagged shapes that she labeled simply as loud noises and nighttime. Using these drawings as conversation starters, Michael gently explored Olivia's experiences. Though she remained guarded, small revelations emerged through the indirect approach. She mentioned having trouble sleeping because sometimes things get loud at night, and admitted that she worried a lot about her mother when they weren't together. When Michael asked if there was anything at home that made her feel scared or unsafe, Olivia's reaction was telling: immediate physical tension, eyes darting to the door as if checking who might overhear, and a practiced response: "No, everything's fine at home." The session provided valuable insights but no actionable disclosures that would warrant immediate intervention. Michael documented everything carefully, sharing his observations with Ms. Foster and Principal Chun. They collectively decided to increase check-ins with Olivia and attempt to engage her mother in a conversation about the anxiety they were observing at school. Despite multiple calls and notes sent home, Olivia's mother did not respond to requests for a meeting. The stepfather eventually returned a call, speaking to Principal Chun and insisting there was nothing happening at home that would cause concern. He attributed Olivia's behaviors to attention-seeking and manipulation, phrases that raised additional red flags for the educational team familiar with how abusers often characterize children's distress signals. As October turned to November, Michael's concern for Olivia grew increasingly urgent. She had begun to arrive at school appearing exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes suggesting chronic sleep deprivation. During one lunch bunch session, he noticed what appeared to be a bruise partially visible beneath her collar when she reached across the table, a marking she quickly covered when she noticed his glance. Most alarmingly, her previously strong academic performance was declining rapidly, with Ms. Foster reporting she sometimes appeared to dissociate during lessons, staring blankly as if mentally somewhere else entirely. After consulting with Principal Chun about the escalating concerns and the family's resistance to engagement, Michael made an unusual and significant decision. With the principal's reluctant approval and his wife's support regarding the potential professional risk, he determined to observe the family's dynamics directly through a brief, discreet follow-up after school one day. "This isn't standard protocol," he acknowledged during their discussion, "but I'm deeply worried about this child, and we're running into walls trying to understand what she's experiencing." The plan was straightforward and minimally intrusive. Michael would position himself near the parent pickup area at dismissal, observe the family interaction during pickup, and then drive the same general route to see the neighborhood conditions and perhaps gain insights about the home environment that might inform their support strategies for Olivia. He was careful to emphasize that he would maintain appropriate distance and not engage in anything that could be considered stalking or invasion of privacy. On a rainy Wednesday afternoon, Michael's decision to follow this unusual course of action led to the discovery that would change everything. Positioned near the pickup area with a legitimate professional reason for being present, he observed Olivia's stepfather arrive in a luxury SUV. The man's demeanor shifted noticeably upon entering the school grounds. The aggressive driving Michael had observed on the approach to the school transformed into a carefully pleasant expression as he greeted the dismissal monitor. Michael watched as Olivia spotted the vehicle, her body language immediately changing, shoulders hunching, pace slowing. The same fear response he had observed with closing doors now triggered by her stepfather's arrival. This visible dread at seeing a caregiver was a significant red flag that confirmed his concerns were well-founded. As Olivia reluctantly entered the vehicle, Michael noted the stepfather's expression change again. Once they were inside, the pleasant mask dropping into something colder as he appeared to speak sharply to the child. Though he couldn't hear the exchange, the body language was clear enough to heighten his alarm. Following at a legal distance in his own vehicle, Michael observed the SUV take an unexpected route, not toward the Martinez home address listed in school records, but to an upscale strip mall. The stepfather parked, left Olivia alone in the vehicle, and entered a bar. Through professional restraint, Michael resisted the immediate impulse to approach the vehicle, instead documenting the time and situation while maintaining observation from a distance. After nearly 40 minutes, during which Olivia sat completely still in the passenger seat, never removing her backpack or appearing to relax, the stepfather emerged from the establishment, his gait and behavior suggesting he had consumed alcohol. When they resumed driving, Michael followed at a greater distance, increasingly concerned about the situation unfolding before him. The SUV eventually turned into an affluent neighborhood and pulled into the driveway of a large, well-maintained home, the Martinez residence. What Michael witnessed next would confirm his worst fears about Olivia's home environment. As they exited the vehicle, the stepfather stumbled slightly, then grabbed Olivia roughly by the arm when she didn't move quickly enough toward the house. Though the interaction was brief and partially obscured by distance, the man's aggressive physicality and Olivia's fearful compliance were unmistakable. Most tellingly, as they approached the front door, Michael observed Olivia's body tense visibly in anticipation. When the door closed behind them with an audible slam, even from his position down the street, the connection became crystal clear. The sound of a closing door had become associated with what happened behind that door, triggering the flinch response he had observed repeatedly at school. Michael documented everything he had observed, including precise times, locations, and behaviors. Though he had not witnessed explicit abuse that would constitute immediate grounds for removal, he had seen enough concerning interactions to justify escalating the case. After consulting with Principal Chun by phone from his car, they agreed to contact both Child Protective Services and the police department to request a welfare check, citing the combination of school observations and the potentially dangerous situation of a young child left alone in a vehicle by an adult who then consumed alcohol before driving. The response was swift. A patrol officer arrived at the Martinez home within 30 minutes, with Michael waiting nearby to provide additional information if needed. The initial welfare check revealed that Mrs. Martinez was not home as expected but working a late shift, leaving Olivia alone with her stepfather despite previous representations to the school that the mother was the primary caregiver during after-school hours. What began as a routine welfare check escalated when officers observed signs of intoxication in the stepfather and concerning home conditions that suggested ongoing domestic disorder. Most significantly, Olivia, when interviewed separately by a female officer with specialized training in child interviews, disclosed a pattern of escalating physical and emotional abuse by her stepfather, primarily occurring when her mother was working evening shifts. The investigation expanded rapidly from that point. Olivia was taken to the children's hospital where Michael's wife Elena happened to be on duty as a pediatric nurse. The medical examination revealed evidence of physical abuse, including older bruises in various stages of healing that had been concealed beneath clothing. More profound, however, was the psychological assessment, which identified significant trauma responses consistent with ongoing exposure to domestic violence and direct victimization. When Mrs. Martinez arrived at the hospital after being contacted by authorities, her reaction provided additional insights into the family dynamics. Initially defensive and angry about the intervention, her demeanor changed dramatically when shown the documented injuries and presented with Olivia's disclosures. Her subsequent interview with investigators revealed that she too had been experiencing escalating abuse from her husband, along with financial control and isolation that had prevented her from leaving the situation despite growing concerns about her daughter's safety. "He convinced me Olivia was exaggerating or making things up," she explained through tears to the victim advocate assigned to the case. "When she tried to tell me what was happening while I was at work, he would say she was manipulating me, trying to come between us. I wanted to believe him because the alternative was too horrifying, that I had brought someone into our lives who was hurting my child. This pattern, an abuser undermining a child's credibility with the protective parent, was one Michael had encountered in his professional training but rarely seen addressed so directly in active cases. It highlighted the complexity of family violence and the psychological manipulation that often trapped multiple victims within the same household. For Michael, the days following his discovery were both vindicating and deeply sobering. His decision to follow his instincts beyond standard protocols had potentially saved Olivia from escalating harm, yet the reality of what she had been experiencing, a child silently enduring abuse while adults failed to fully recognize her distress signals, weighed heavily on his professional conscience. "You did everything right," Elena assured him during a rare moment of shared reflection on the case, careful to maintain appropriate confidentiality despite her involvement through the hospital. "You noticed what others missed, you documented carefully, you followed up when standard approaches weren't working. Most importantly, you trusted your instincts about a child in danger." The case proceeded with unusual efficiency through both the child welfare and criminal justice systems. The stepfather was arrested on multiple charges related to child abuse and domestic violence, with additional charges added when investigators discovered evidence of financial fraud that had allowed him to maintain the facade of success while actually draining the family's resources. Olivia and her mother were provided emergency relocation services, ensuring they would not have to return to the home where the abuse had occurred. Most significantly for Olivia's long-term well-being, the intervention connected both her and her mother with trauma-informed support services through Dr. Morales' program, the same initiative Michael had learned about during that brief hallway introduction weeks earlier. This meant they would receive specialized therapy addressing their specific experiences rather than being placed on long waiting lists for generic counseling services. The ripple effects of Olivia's case extended far beyond her individual situation. Dr. Morales used the case as a catalyst for expanding training on recognizing trauma responses in children, with Michael invited to develop a component specifically focused on the behavioral cues that might indicate home-based trauma. His observation of Olivia's flinching response to closing doors became a powerful teaching example of how children's bodies often reveal what they cannot safely verbalize. Principal Chin, deeply affected by how long Olivia had been suffering despite being surrounded by caring educators, initiated a school-wide shift toward more trauma-informed disciplinary and support practices. When we see behavior as communication, particularly repetitive or unusual reactions to common stimuli, we open ourselves to understanding what children are trying to tell us when direct disclosure feels unsafe, she explained during a staff training session. 2 months after the intervention, Olivia and her mother were established in a new apartment in a different neighborhood, supported by both financial assistance programs and the domestic violence recovery organization that had helped them create a safety plan. Mrs. Martinez had found employment with more family-friendly hours, allowing her to be present during the after-school period that had previously left Olivia vulnerable. Most remarkably, Olivia herself was showing signs of healing that exceeded typical expectations for such a short time period. With appropriate trauma-focused therapy, she was developing language to express her experiences and coping strategies to manage her hypervigilance. At school, where she had been able to remain thanks to transportation assistance that prevented another disruptive transition, she was gradually re-engaging academically and beginning to form cautious friendships with classmates. During a follow-up session in Michael's office, approximately 3 months after the intervention, he observed a moment that crystallized the transformation taking place. In the middle of their conversation, another counselor opened and then firmly closed the door to the adjacent office. Michael instinctively glanced at Olivia, prepared to see the now familiar flinch, but it didn't come. She noticed his observation and offered a small smile. "I'm practicing what Dr. Kayla taught me," she explained, referring to her trauma therapist. "When I hear a door, I remind myself where I am right now and that I'm safe here." This simple statement, reflecting both awareness of her trauma response and active engagement in reclaiming her sense of safety, moved Michael deeply. It represented the beginning of liberation from the fear that had controlled her daily experience of the world. By spring, approximately 6 months after Michael had first noticed her flinching response, Olivia was thriving in ways that had seemed impossible during those early observations. Her academic performance had returned to its previous strong level, She had developed genuine friendships with several classmates, and most tellingly, she had begun to use her experience to help others. When a new student with similar anxiety symptoms joined the class, it was Olivia who quietly showed him the calming corner and demonstrated the breathing techniques she had learned in therapy. The most profound transformation, however, was evident in the relationship between Olivia and her mother. Where there had been tension and distance, there was now emerging trust and open communication. Mrs. Martinez had committed fully to her own healing journey, participating actively in both individual therapy and a support group for parents recovering from domestic violence. Most importantly, she had learned to truly hear her daughter, to believe her experiences without the distortion of an abuser's manipulation. "She listens differently now," Olivia told Michael during one of their continuing check-in sessions. "Even when I tell her hard things, she doesn't get that scared look or try to make me stop talking." This restored trust between mother and child represented perhaps the most significant healing, addressing the profound betrayal Olivia had experienced when her initial attempts to disclose the abuse had been dismissed or rationalized away. The case had also transformed systems beyond Olivia's immediate situation. The school district, recognizing the vital role Michael had played in identifying the abuse, allocated funding for an additional counseling position, reducing caseloads to more manageable levels. A formal collaboration was established between the schools and Dr. Morales' Trauma Initiative, creating expedited pathways for assessment and treatment when educators identified concerning behaviors that might indicate trauma. Most significantly, the local police department implemented new protocols for welfare checks involving children, ensuring that specially trained officers would conduct separate, trauma-informed interviews with children whenever concerns about potential home-based abuse were raised. This systematic change meant that other children in situations similar to Olivia's would be more likely to have opportunities for safe disclosure. 1 year after Michael had first noticed Olivia flinching at the sound of closing doors, he received a handmade card from her during the last week of school. The carefully created artwork showed a girl standing tall beside a door, with a simple message inside: "Thank you for seeing what I couldn't say. Now I don't have to be afraid of doors anymore." Accompanying the card was a note from Mrs. Martinez, expressing her profound gratitude for Michael's persistence in looking beyond behavior to its causes. "You saw my daughter's fear when I had been convinced not to see it," she wrote. "Your courage in following your instincts gave us both a chance at a life free from fear and full of possibilities we couldn't imagine a year ago." As Michael prepared for the summer break, reflecting on the school year's challenges and successes, he considered the extraordinary journey that had begun with a simple observation about a child's startle response. What could easily have been dismissed as a quirky behavioral tic or sensory sensitivity had instead revealed a child living in fear, leading not only to her protection but to systemic changes that would benefit countless other vulnerable children. The following September, as Michael welcomed students back for the new academic year, he carried with him a deeper commitment to trusting his professional instincts and looking beyond surface behaviors to their potential meanings. When a new student in 5th grade began hoarding food from the cafeteria, Michael noticed immediately, not with alarm or judgment, but with the appropriate attention such behavior warranted in light of his experience with Olivia. Recovery hadn't been instant for Olivia or her mother. The physical bruises had healed quickly, but the hypervigilance, trust issues, and emotional wounds required ongoing care and professional support. The systems, too, had changed: new awareness, better coordination, increased resources. Small but significant steps toward ensuring that other children would not have to rely on behavioral cues like flinching to communicate their distress, that other families might receive intervention before years of suffering accumulated behind closed doors. The story that had begun with a child's fear of closing doors had transformed into something unexpected, not just an intervention that saved one family, but a catalyst for community-wide changes that would protect many others. As Michael arranged his office for the first counseling sessions of the new school year, he kept Olivia's card on his bulletin board as a reminder of why looking beyond behavior to its causes was perhaps the most important skill any educator or counselor could develop. Not an ending, but a new beginning for Olivia, for her healing mother, and for a community more attuned to the silent signals that children sometimes use when words are too frightening or forbidden. A reminder that healing is possible when caring professionals pay attention to the small details that speak volumes. and when systems respond not just with protection but with support for all those affected by family violence. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more.